I am indeed the luckiest person in the world. My beautiful friend Deb, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Hello, everybody. My name is Debra Driscoll, but most of my community call me Deb D. And I am a grief guide and a magic weaver, which doesn't
Uh-huh.
seem like it fits together, but it actually does. The work that I do is helping people transform from their big life loss to their big life magic.
Mm. Big life loss. So, Deb, what I found fascinating when you and I were talking about, this podcast interview, you defined something for me that I had never heard it defined in such a way that loss isn't just losing someone to death, for example, through someone losing a loved one through a life transition. There are other definitions of death. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, loss and grief is a natural vibration of our heart. It's a part of our human experience. I mean, we don't like it. It's not the most fun part of our experience, but loss is universal. And I believe that we all are going to encounter a big life loss. Like for me, it was the loss of my beautiful son, Sage Joseph. For
Mm.
somebody else, it's going to be their divorce or a diagnosis or a major life transition, but life is going to meet loss.
Right. Or loss of a job,
Yeah.
or a loss of a home through a storm. We're talking about grief in the broadest sense here, but how we need to experience it, right? You have things for us to think about though as we experience these losses. Tell us a little bit more about how you help people face these losses and get and feel better about themselves.
Well, it all began because I had to help myself with
Mm,
my big life loss, with my son's unexpected death. I went
so
from,
sorry.
yeah, I mean, I'm sorry too. And also, I have found gifts in it, which I never thought was possible. Like, the day after my son died, if someone said to me, this is going to be life changing and you're going to be teaching about this and writing about this, I would say, oh, I don't think so.
Right?
I don't
Right? I
know
can't
how,
imagine.
I don't know how this story can turn around. And it did. It took me a long time,
Mm.
but I embarked on the journey of, I really wanted to understand how can we navigate loss. And as a spiritual teacher, I had a whole heap of tools. So I was like, what about if I use all of these tools for myself? Can I
Right.
survive this? Can I thrive? Can I build a new life beyond this big life loss? And yeah, you can.
Mm.
Not easy, tricky terrain, but it's worth it because what it does is it helps to strengthen your energetic heart.
It helps to strengthen. So, these things happen to us and we feel so weak, Deb. They really,
Mhm.
and I'm so sorry for the loss of your son. I can't imagine those feelings that you experienced, but you are here today to say we build a new platform on this and you're here to help others. And what a tremendous generosity that you have. And you're like, okay, I'm better and I want to help others get better in whatever loss that they may have, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we can get lost inside our loss. And the
Mm.
thing that we don't have is we don't always have access to the scaffolding. So it's like when I used to live in New York, I used to just be so surprised with how much scaffolding there is in New York City. Like
Right.
every building on every block seems to be in repair. And I think that's true for us. We're constantly in repair and being in the new vibration of being repaired, and then something else will break. And this is the human experience.
Right.
And when we hit a big life loss, what we need is scaffolding. We need that external, I'm going to hold you in this, because when we are lost, when we hit this grief, when our hearts break, our role in that is to surrender, to let
Yeah.
go, to allow ourselves to go into the loss and travel through. But that's really hard to do if you don't feel like you have any scaffolding.
Right.
Because
What
a
a
lot of people
beautiful,
I work, you know, a lot of people I work with think I can't go down the hole, I can't surrender because I'll never come back out.
right,
That's
right.
the fear. And that's actually a myth because the hole, it's not actually a hole, it's a pathway.
It's a pathway. And what a beautiful metaphor. I love the metaphor of the scaffolding because I'm envisioning building as we are as humans, right? And we just need support, right?
Yeah.
So did you look to other people, Deb, in building that scaffolding? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
I literally went on a journey. So a few months after my son died, I decided to set myself free. I sold my house. I sold most of our
Mm,
belongings. Anything I wanted to keep was packed away and put in the back shed at my mother's house. And I literally set off on a journey to learn and discover what is possible in this loss. And that
mm,
took me to Sri Lanka and Indonesia and different parts of Australia. And some of that journey was on my own in silent meditation and writing. Some of that was with some spiritual teachers. Some of that was with different communities, particularly in Sri Lanka. I was engaged in a project in Sri Lanka that was post-Civil War. And had already been engaged in this project for a couple of years. I spent a lot of time in Sri Lanka with those communities because they were literally building after massive loss that wasn't just personal. This was like for their communities and their whole
right.
country. So there was a lot of scaffolding there for me,
Mm,
learning how are they doing that and what does this mean for me. And essentially the scaffolding was me also drawing upon the spiritual tools that I already had. I'm a Reiki master who works with Reiki. I work in meditation. I work with oracle cards. I follow the cycles of the moon. And
right.
all of that was, it felt like up until this point, it was like I knew the theory of all of that. I could teach it, but it wasn't actually really applied to my life until I really needed it.
Right.
Then
Right.
there was this deepening of my spiritual practice. It's like, oh, I know why I need to follow this now. Because the
Right.
moon itself is scaffolding for me. The moon has her phases. And when I follow her, I feel like I am in a structured transformation.
Right. So it seems as if it was intuitive for you. So what can we offer to listeners who are perhaps still dealing with a loss and haven't found their scaffolding? What can we offer? Your journey is exquisite and it worked for you. What is it that we can offer to them that perhaps that they can lean into?
When I'm working with people with grief, the question that I ask always is, how is your heart? Grief and loss is all about our heart. And it's the repair of our heart, which is why I'm creating the heart repair program, which is the scaffolding that's going to be launching next year. But when I'm meeting with people who are lost inside that loss, I had to say to them, just breathe into your heart space and ask yourself, how is my heart?
Mm.
And if only your question of that one day is like 30 seconds long of sitting and reflecting on that, then that's the beginning of your scaffolding. Because we
Yep.
can create the scaffolding for ourselves and we can invite others to support us in doing that. And there's lots of resources that we can find. But the tricky thing about when we're lost inside our loss, we can't find anything.
Can't find
It's
anything.
like
So,
asking someone who's grieving, how are you? We literally don't know. Grief affects
right.
the brain, so we can't actually identify how we are, which
Yeah.
is why I teach people, ask yourself, or if you are supporting someone in acute or chronic grief who is experiencing a big life loss, don't ask them how they are. Ask them, how is your heart?
Mm,
And then just listen. We're not trying to fix. We're just holding. Be the scaffolding for somebody else. Be the scaffolding for yourself. And the thing about our working with our loss, we need to build our capacity. So I invite people, just literally start with 30 seconds a day of breathing and saying, I will breathe into this loss. I will check in with my heart. And then maybe in a week, you can expand out to a minute. Then
Yep.
maybe in a month, you're there for 10 minutes sitting with your heart. But we need to build our capacity to be with it. And then as that capacity builds, that's when you can start to sink in and surrender to the gifts that are available.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a beautiful stillness. There's a lot of answers that come through, which you're suggesting here, which I love. And it's just leaning into that time. So, what a great question to ask someone who's grieving. Like you said, not how are you? How is your heart? Because that is where we feel it, right? That's where all of our
That's it.
feelings are.
Yeah.
That's what's
That's
awake or asleep,
yeah. And
right?
somebody who's in grief, like at that big life loss moment, you are so connected to your feelings that that's all that you become, how you are
Yep.
feeling,
Yes. It
not
is
what you
about
want
how
for
you're feeling,
lunch. You don't really care what you want for lunch. You don't,
right?
you know what I mean? Like all of that doesn't seem to matter anymore. So just literally going to the heart of it. The other thing I like to share is that grief has a soulmate, and grief's soulmate is joy. This is something else that can help people, it can be a scaffolding for people, is if I surrender to this loss, if I work with it, if I find ways to stitch my heart back together again, what I'm doing is not only repairing my loss, I am expanding my capacity for joy. For if we limit our grief, we limit our joy. For they're two extremes of our heart. And so by expanding and being with our loss, we in turn, over time, will experience expanded joy. And that I have experienced. And it's highly recommended.
Highly recommended. I would
Highly
say,
recommended.
of course, to have just to let in one to have the other. And it is so important to have joy. And that's really what I try to bring in with this show, is just recognizing certain things within ourselves, how to be your best self. And you're opening up here such an incredible platform, because all of us have had loss, all of us, right? Either a loved one, a job, or just there's always been something. So I totally appreciate your approach here and all of these beautiful things that you get to do, Deb, and all of these incredible places that you've traveled. Is there a piece of clothing or an accessory, and how does it make you feel, like something that really resonates with your heart?
Yes, indeed. I have a rose quartz necklace with matching earrings. The necklace was bought as a present to myself when my business turned 1. And the earrings that match were a present from my husband, not very long after we got married. And so when I wear them, not only is rose quartz the crystal of the heart, and I'm all about heart repair, but when I wear them, I feel like myself is stitched together. It gives me this confidence of like, it feels like I'm wearing my heart out there for people to see, of who I love and the work that I love to do. And it's also like, you know, the pink color, I think it's really good for my tones and stuff. So you feel good, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like when I put them on as a pair, I'm like, yeah, that's me. Like I'm turning up in and with love.
I love that. That is so fantastic. You've described it so perfectly, and how you feel, what it does for you, and what it can do for other people, because other people will genuinely feel that energy. I love that so much. Deb, so this has been such a beautiful conversation. If someone wanted to continue this conversation with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
There's 2 places I recommend. There's my website, biglifemagic.com. And if you go to the website, you can see the diversity of the different ways I work with people. But I would advise going to the stories tab. As well as being a magic weaver and a grief guide, I'm also an author, and I love to write. So there's many stories I have about grief transformation and also magic activation there on my website. So if you're someone who likes to read stories, I would go there. If you're somebody who wants to interact and be with me, I'd go to the Big Life Magic YouTube channel, where I have meditations, I have oracle card readings, and I'm talking about this journey of repairing our heart.
Wonderful. That is so beautiful. I will put those links in the show notes, and wish you all the best as you're healing people. What incredible work
Mhm.
that you do. So thank you for making the world a better place, Deb, and I
Thank
appreciate you. Thank
you.
you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Many blessings.